Crafting is an ancient tradition that intertwines creativity, skill, and imagination. Whether you are shaping a delicate piece of jewelry, knitting a cozy sweater, or forging a mighty sword, you are bridging the gap between thought and reality. Breathe life into materials, transform them, tell a story, and bring beauty into the world. Hello, 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 I am Puppinsuds. I'm here bringing you a homebrew set of rules for DC20, the best TTRPG out there. So the crafting rules I'll be bringing you are entirely homebrewed here, and they're for the beta 0.8. It's been through a couple of revisions with the Discord community, so thank you all who have helped me out with these rulings. One of the first section here when you read through the guide is how do you use this guide? First, to craft, you gotta harvest. Then you can use your trade to actually build some items. And we try to keep it simple here, so if you want to do one of these things, you have to do it in lieu of a rest. So your rest actions, those are ideas that were put out there by DC20, but I've sort of simplified it to this. In a rest, you can either do a 4-hour rest where you get back all your non-class related features, or you do a 4-hour rest where you get your class related features. Alternative to both of those is doing a rest action. This could be harvesting, crafting, etc. This is really fun because it gives you the options to either get back like your rest points, your mana points, or other long rest features, or you could actually build something. So maybe not every long rest you need to be sleeping, right? Overall, when you string the number 1 and number 2 together, you get the normal long rest that is DC20. And for everything else, I've just simplified it so it's in combat or out of combat, and the GM decides the time for you being out of combat. I'll typically do skill challenges or social encounters, or things like that out of combat. So any feature that says something like refresh on a short rest, just let them refresh out of combat. That's pretty easy, not too broken. Alright, Harvesting 101. To make a harvest check, you're going to roll a specific skill associated with that trade. It's going to take you 4 hours to harvest materials. You can gain 1 material from 4 hours, or if you succeed by 5, you'll get 2 materials. This material is probably going to be logged in your item inventory like wood or bronze, or you can just call it a material if your GM's pretty lenient. Alternative to all this, you might be able to purchase materials. You can go to a lumberjack and get wood or whatnot. This actually gives you some ideas of what the shops might be like in town when you go and visit different towns in DC20. Finally, you could even harvest creatures. So after a battle, you can harvest a creature, and it's a simple 10 plus the creature level check based on the type of creature or just an animal check. So for the most part, it's going to be Arcana for things like elementals and constructs. You might be able to use nature for different things like plants and fays. The list goes on, and it's specified here. So when you want to harvest a creature, use your knowledge skill to harvest that creature. Remember, if you fail by 5, you're going to gain a level of exhaustion. So be careful. Don't just use this willy-nilly. Alright, tools. There's 2 types of tools. Basic tools is the tools you get for having your mastery. They come with your adventuring kit. You already have them. You don't have to buy them additionally. That's just way easier. So you just have the tools if you have the trade. The supporting tools are tools that might be a supporting trade, really, that can help you with your current work scope. So if you're doing blacksmithing, somebody with masonry can actually build you a makeshift forge, and you can use that to improve your blacksmithing in the moment. If you do get supporting tools, either from an ally who also takes a rest action, or you could use your own supporting tools, you're going to actually increase the time of the entire crafting process. And that's different for every trade. But you're going to get an extra dice to roll. You're going to get your normal D20 plus your trade bonus plus your supporting dice. And that's what's going to happen when you craft. So you're going to roll that D20, add your trade bonus, and get your supporting dice if you had it. And that's going to matter hugely for not failing and having actually successes by 5, where you might even get a bonus on your item. That's just not normal. The products that you can make, it depends on the type of material or the type of trade you're working with. I'll walk through that in a little bit when I go through all the trades. I have a separate section on consumables. Basically, it's the same thing, except they disappear when you use them. And finally, other tools you may be interested in that I don't right now have rules for are illustration, cartography, music, gaming, vehicles. But I have some ideas out here that use these when you need to for your games. Argue with your GM. Maybe your GM will be nice about these types of things you could do with the tools, or maybe even craft a lock from lockpicking. And you can use these general ideas overall to help out with that. All right, I put a summary table up front, which is just what the harvesting skill check is, what the trade is, what the supporting trade could be, and the time you would need to craft it. So you could use this if you really want to get into it, build your characters out, and basically have some fun with your character building and choosing your trades. All right, the first section here starts off with wood and stone. For me, this is just like a survival game. You start off punching trees and grabbing stones from the ground. That's the most basic thing, and it's the easiest to find. So these are DC5 survival or nature checks, survival or investigation checks to find the materials you need. You need carpentry. For stone, you can either have sculpting or masonry. They're interchangeable for this part. And then you can support them overall with other tools that are specified here. It only takes an hour to craft some of these, so it's probably the fastest crafting stuff you can do, but there's limitations. A wood item can't have the heavier impact properties, and a stone item, you might have all properties available, but if you take like a bow, you can only build these subset of styles, and if you take a bow, it's basically a sling, so it's got to have unwieldy with it. So that's sort of the limitations when you get along with this. Now, that's the normal weapon properties and weapon styles that are in DC20, and maybe even if you succeed by 5 in certain checks, you can get 1 additional property. That could be fun, up to the GM if they want to let you do that or not. Now, the shields and armors, though, they actually have more of a Zelda-like quality here. If you have a wood shield, you have resistance to lightning damage, but you're vulnerable to fire damage. If you have a stone shield, you actually are slower because the stone's so heavy, but you get some damage reduction from it. And this continues as we think about other enhancements. I even added an obsidian enhancement. I love the Aztec weapons that are made out of obsidian, and they basically would add 1 slashing damage to the weapon, but if you take a heavier brutal hit, it shatters, it's gone. So you can't just use it forever. Alright, clothing, weaving, sort of a harder one to find, but you'll find these with medicine checks or nature checks for finding flax. You'll then use weaving to do that. Carpentry might help you make a loom to improve your weaving. And then overall you can build cool things like gambeson armor, which actually gives you an additional hit point when you spend a rest point while wearing the cloth armor. But if you take slashing damage, the gambeson armor's gone. You can add a tassel to a weapon so you get advantage on some feint actions. On the leatherworking, leather kind of gives you resistance to slashing damage, but you're vulnerable to bludgeoning damage because you can't take the impact. As you keep going down here, there's some ideas with bronze. I broke up blacksmithing into bronze and steel. So with bronze, you can do a lot of things with it, but it's harder to find actually. It's easier to find steel. But with bronze, you can maybe make items that are resistant to corrosion damage, vulnerable to lightning damage. You can get any weapon property, and you can change things. The huge benefit is you can apply to light or heavy armor, either one. It's sort of this really awesome material. And you can make the exclusive bronze helmet, which can make you advantage on saves versus being dazed. Okay, steel, the tried and true material. We all use steel. Everyone loves steel. It's resistant to fire damage if you have steel armor, but you're vulnerable to corrosion damage because steel really doesn't like acid. If you have a steel helmet, your might saves might be a little bit better. And then we can keep going here. There's some weapon properties and various things. So different styles. Steel is nice and easy to find. That's probably the biggest benefit. And you can try to work them out with your weapons. All right. Silvering. Now this is tinkering. You can use Tinker's tools to basically find silver, and since silver is so related to vampires and werewolves, you're going to need a religion or a occultism check to find silver. It's rare, and it's really hard to find. But if you basically enhance your weapon with it, you're going to have advantage on those specific types of creatures. Undead, werewolves, it's sort of GM dependent on what classifies as those dark creatures. The silver armor enhancement is similar. It's if they attack you, they have disadvantage on attacking you. So silver is really powerful against these types of campaigns where you're fighting these supernatural undead werewolf type creatures. With tinkering, you can also make traps. So with traps, you find the elements you want, and you can use leatherworking to help your traps out. And you can make things like basic caltrops, ball bearings, a rope trap to snare someone, or a hunting trap to capture them. And they're all listed here. I'm sure there's a ton more traps we could come up with. But for now, basic rules, kind of keeping it simple and not trying to step on the trap ranger later on. All right. Jewelry. Now, hard to come up with jewelry, but I think DC Dungeon Coach even had like a idea with enhancing your weapons with jewels. So one of the ideas here that comes off from that is you find it with your Arcana or your History check. When you get these gemstones, they're basically imbued with magic, and you can change the damage of a weapon type by enhancing the weapon, and it can be a fire weapon or a cold weapon, and a jewel can do this, and that could be really awesome. And that might be specific to the type of jewel you're in. If you're in an ice cave, maybe it's an ice weapon. If you're in a molten lava place and you find obsidian, maybe it's a jeweled obsidian thing that you can add for a fire on your weapon, things like that. And then on the armor side, you can basically add a jeweled enhancement that changes the or lets you be resistant to that damage type associated with the jewels. So that's the idea with jewels. There could be more to it. You could even give bonus damage if you have successes here. That's up to the GM of how they want to award that. I don't try to be too specific what the successes by 5 are, because that's up to your creativity. All right. Consumables. Now into the consumable section. All these items will be consumed as you use them. Inspired by survival games, Breath of the Wild, things like that. When you go to cooking, it's basically the chef feat. If you have cooking, you just have the chef feat. We don't need to have a separate feat for that. It's pretty easy to find food. It's just plentiful. But, you know, this is not to say you're going to starve if you don't find food. This is in addition to your normal food getting situation. So if you can make some really good food for your allies and they eat it, they actually will gain 1 temporary hit point. So every breakfast, you know, give them a good breakfast for cooking. You could even try the ideas for like spicy food or chilled food to give you resistance to specific types of damage. And maybe different monster parts would even be cooked up like Delicious in Dungeon, and you could use that as a basis for making more of these types of cooking ideas. But no matter what, they're consumable, and it takes only 10 minutes to make this, so it's pretty fast. Alright, beverages. They take a little bit longer to make, but they might be a little bit stronger. Liquid Courage, basically booze, gives you 1 more grit point. Coffee gives you 1 more stamina point. Tea gives you another rest point. So these are some ideas here for brewing, and could be really fun. Yeah. All right. Potions and herbalism. As we talk about potions and herbalism, we want to talk about what you can make with this. There's a lot of options here. Herbalism is extremely strong. It's a little bit harder to find. DC15 check, nature check to find all the materials. Glassblowing can help you with like beakers and mugs and whatnot to make these potions. And when you make it, you can make a mana potion. It's a DC15 check. Replenishes 1 mana. Now remember, this is in lieu to resting where you would have just gotten your mana back anyway. So it's really a stored set of mana if you somehow didn't want to get your mana back this night. Healing potions are actually in the game. They replenish 2 hit points, DC 15. And then a restoration potion. It actually just removes the condition when you drink it. And then, I love this on the Discord that people were talking about. The different attributes are actually thick, quick, slick, and wit. So a thick potion gives you advantage in your next might check. Quick on agility, etc., etc. Kind of fun. And then Liquid Luck, a harder to make thing, but it gives you advantage in just your next check in general. And finally, the Poison Vial. You can throw this, and it's basically going to poison the target, and it's going to make it, have the poison condition. Alright. Alchemy, this is going to be a really fun one, especially if you're a ranger. I think that's going to really add to it. Some of these ideas are already here with Hunter Strike, so with Hunter Strike you can just use your stamina to do these. You don't even need alchemy. But if you wanted to make these and store them up and give them to an ally, they could start chucking these as well. Things like Greek Fire, you can make someone burn. Acid Vials, you can have them corrode. And so now these are just damage over time effects, 1 for each damage type. I think they're pretty fun. I think they could be really cool for general fights, depending on what you want. Alright, I want to get into spell components. This is a different system here. Magic is everywhere, and you're going to be able to use spell components to actually enhance your magic. Now, I'll explain this in a second, but basically I've simplified the rules so that all spells are both verbal and somatic, and we'll get back to that in a second. So to get spell components, you're still going to harvest. Take 4 hours to harvest, so it just keeps that time limit going, so you just can't keep getting too much of this. And then if you have a component, depending on the type of check and the type of spell list you're from, a little bit of GM acknowledgement there on what the types of checks should be. But basically you should look through these and get the components you want, depending on terrain, types of checks you make, things like that. When you have the components, you can do 3 things with them. One of the 3. One, you could replace the verbal or somatic component. So this is like a subtle spell. You could basically consume your component, always gets consumed, and suddenly you can cast spells while being silent. Or if you have subtle spell, you can do that and not even need to use your hands if you have components. And the components in my head, they're sort of in your pouch, and when you invoke them, you can channel your energy through them and they just disappear from your pouch. You don't have to like use a separate hand to grab them, which is kind of confusing with somatic. So yeah, basically you can replace your verbal or your somatic components. And then you can enhance your spell checks with them. Just an easy +1 to your spell check. It consumes the component, but maybe you really want it to work. Consume a bunch of components, let it happen. And then you can bottle a spell. So this one is possibly overpowered, and I'm cautious about it. But you would first need to have glassblowing tools. You need to make a component bottle with the DC15 check. Then you need to spend your mana to cast a spell into the bottle and consume components equal to the mana you spent. Cantrips don't work. You can't use cantrips. But if you put like a sleep spell in a bottle, you pump the mana into it, you consume some components to do it, you bottle that overnight, and you now have the ability to toss that on someone and they fall asleep, and it didn't cost you any mana because it cost you the mana from the day before. Might be a gimmick that players start to use too much, but keep it fun. Make glassblowing useful. That's the idea. You can think glassblowing is just sand, so it's really easy to find sand, I would think. But if you want to make it a harder check, take longer, whatever you want to do that. Just make sure that you don't let them be like overpowered with 500 spell bottles. All right. That is my homebrew crafting rules. Now, folks, I'm going to be making a channel here that's going to be going through all of homebrew rules that I've come up with that other people may volunteer to put on this channel. So please like and subscribe if you want to hear more homebrew ideas to help get beta 0.8 a little bit more complete. Maybe have some ideas for you to use now so you don't wait for the next revision, things like that. So we're all here, we all love DC20, and we're super excited for all the rules that are coming down from the Dungeon Coach. Thanks, guys. See you later.